Hey guys, it's David from 3D Make It. Today I'm going to show you how to take a Raspberry Pi, install Octoprint, and take control of your printer remotely. Let's go! So before we jump into how to install Octoprint, I just want to talk about why. There's really one reason, and that's remote control and monitoring of your printer. Octoprint lets you take control remotely so that you can cancel, start jobs, watch them, make sure everything's happening nicely. Octoprint usually runs on a Raspberry Pi. You can use a Raspberry Pi 4 like this one. You can also use the Raspberry Pi 3 in any of its flavors. I use a 3A and a 3B+, and they work fantastic. I also have it running on a 0, but it's pretty slow, so I wouldn't recommend that. So now that we've talked about why, let's jump into the installing. Okay, so our first step is going to be downloading the Raspberry Pi image. Now, I have a Raspberry Pi 4, but you can use a 3. I wouldn't recommend anything lower than a 3, but it definitely does work on a 0. I have it running. But I have a 4. Now, right now, officially it's not supported on the website, but there is a test build for us. The test build does work, and I'm sure that eventually the main link will work. If you have anything that's a 3, you can use the main build, but we're just going to grab this test build, and it'll take us to the page, and we're just going to grab the zip file. Now I have it downloaded down here. The other thing we're going to need to use is Etcher. Now Etcher is found at balena.io/etcher. You pick your architecture. I have Windows. You can pick Linux or Mac if you need to. You hit download. Now, once we start the install, Etcher is just an agree and it will run through. There shouldn't be a UAC prompt in it, so it should just run all the way through without you having to click yes, I agree to install this. And once it installs, it will self-open. So now that Etcher is open, we just have to do one more thing. We're going to come and we're going to go into that downloads folder. And from that downloads folder, we actually need to go and unzip that image file we downloaded. And in that folder is the actual image we'll be using. So Etcher, super simple. There's 3 steps. Select the image, we just downloaded it. So go to your downloads folder, go into the folder you extracted, and grab that image. Once there, you can just grab open. Next, you can change the SD card if you have more than one in your machine. I have one, it's auto selected, but it does have a nice little pop-up if you need it. Lastly, flash. Now, the UAC window will pop up. That's why the screen turned black on us here. But once it flashes, you'll be ready to use it. So we'll come back once the flashing is close to the end. So just while that's writing, I just want to make sure we're all aware of the fact that we're writing an SD card. So that means you have to have an SD card reader. Specifically, we're writing a micro SD. So if you don't have a micro SD card reader on that computer, you're going to just make sure that you have an SD card reader with the adapter. And most of them come with it. You want to buy a high-class, high-speed SD card. And you also want to look at something that's 8 gigs or over to write the image to. So one last thing we're going to need is Notepad++. Notepad++ is a text editor, just like Notepad in Windows, but Notepad++ won't let us down and put Windows encoding into it. We can see here that my Etcher finished because I have a window pop-up for there's a drive in your computer, so I'm just going to cancel that for now. We don't want to reformat the disk we just formatted, but just grab the download from Notepad++, continue through the installer, and then we can continue on with the install. So Etcher is done. It's just going to be validating our USB, or our flash drive at this time. But we can see that if I open up and I go into my folder, that there is a drive called boot. And that is made by Etcher when it writes the Raspberry Pi image. So this is the reason we need Notepad++. We're going to edit one file. And specifically, this file is for those of us that want to use Wi-Fi. So if you're not interested in using Wi-Fi, don't worry about editing this next file, but there is a file that we're going to be adding in that you will need. So upon completion, you're met with this window. You can flash another one, so if you're building a few for a few different printers, you can just keep flashing and flashing. But the other thing it does is eject the flash drive for us, so you're going to have to remount it unplug it, plug it back in, we're fine. So I'm just going to close this window here. I'm going to actually go into my boot, and then from here I'm going to go in and I'm going to grab the Octo WPA supplicant, and I'm going to right click it and I'm going to open it with Notepad++. So we could see that if you were used to configuring it before, there's this network one, but they've updated it. You don't use that anymore. It's this WPA supplicant file. So basically this is where you can set your Wi-Fi. It's super easy. If you're going to run this without actually hooking it into your network, you just have to come in here and you type in your super secret, or not so secret because usually they're public, Wi-Fi name. So you could call it house Wi-Fi or whatever yours is. And then right underneath that, you're just going to put the password. So super password. Now, you can see I left the quotes, so make sure you do leave the quotes. And you're good to go there. There are a few more options underneath. Most of us will be using the WPA or WPA2. If you're using an older router, you might be using WEP, but look at your router's Wi-Fi. It will tell you if you're using WPA or WPA2. As well, if you're just using an open network, which if you are, you shouldn't be, make sure you put a password on your network right now. But if you want to keep using a passwordless network, go ahead. Here's where you put that one in. So once you have that, we just hit save. Hey guys, it's David from the future. Past David, he's really smart, but he forgot to tell you one thing. After you enter your SSID information, you just need to make sure that you delete these leading hashtags in front. So you're going to need to get rid of that one, that one, that one, and that one. So the 4 starting at network and the last curly brace. Thanks. Now if you're running a network cable, you don't need to worry about configuring the Wi-Fi, but you will need this next step. So to get remote access, we use SSH. Now, SSH just lets us send some command prompt, basically lines, to the command line interface of Linux. So from here, we just click New, we hit File, we hit Save As, and in the boot partition still, so still in the same spot where that WPA supplicant file was, we're going to make a new file, we're going to call it SSH, and just hit Save. Now that both those files are on there, now you can see this one already existed, so they might have added that to the image now, which is awesome, but I'm just going to replace it anyway. It's a blank file, it does nothing, but what it does is when we put the flash drive, the trans flash card, into the Pi, it's going to boot up and tell it that 1, we should join a Wi-Fi if we told it to, and 2, give us remote access over SSH so we don't have to have a monitor to keep configuring it. Now comes possibly the hardest part of this whole procedure. You have to take the Raspberry Pi. This is a Raspberry Pi 4, but the 3 looks almost the same on the bottom. And then you have to take that micro SD card and insert it into the Raspberry Pi. So it's worth noting that if you configured Wi-Fi at this point, what you have to do is plug in your printer and a camera, if you want one, into these USB ports, and then just plug the power in. Now on the Raspberry Pi 4, it's USB-C power. That's why I have my little adapter, so I can still use the micro cable. But plug the power in. The Pi will boot up and find the wireless. If you're just using an internet cable, fire that guy in on this side here, plug it into your router, power it up after you've plugged all your printers and things into it. The first boot up will take a few seconds, so don't panic. You should see on the end of the Raspberry Pi a red light flashing right by the power, and then a green light flashes with it. That's good. It means it's booting up. If you just see the solid red light, something went wrong. You might have to reflash the SD card. That's most likely the cause. But if you see the green light, you're good to go. Give it a few seconds, and then we have to find the IP on the network. Awesome, the Pi is plugged in, but we still need to find the IP address. So once the Ethernet cable is plugged in or the Wi-Fi is joined and you have everything plugged into the Pi, we're going to need to find the IP address to actually manage Octoprint. By default, the local instance is called octopi.local. You can find that if you know how to get into your DHCP table on your router at home, or if you have a tool that can scan the network. And one of my favorites is called Angry IP. So Angry IP is a free download. You can come to this website, angryip.org/download, grab the Windows, the very first link I have highlighted here, run through the installer, open it up. It greets you like this. Now at home, this one might say something like 192.168.0.1 and then 192.168.0.254. That will autofill at home. But for here, I want to scan a specific range. So I'm going to grab 172 and then my range here, and I can put my end range in this one. So basically it's going to start at this low IP and it's going to scan until it gets through to the high IP. So we'll hit scan. And so as it goes, it's just going to scan and ping basically those hosts, and it'll find them. So in our case, our new Raspberry Pi is this one. I set this one up earlier, so I know that for a fact. At home, it'll pop up a host name for you. I'm just on a protected network right now. So now that we know that the IP address is this, let's get to configuring our first instance of Octoprint. So when it opens, you'll see the Octoprint window probably, and then this little wizard pops up. Super easy to configure. You just need to know a few things about your printer as we go through. Usually access control, I will give it a username and password. I'll skip it here, but at home you should use access control just to make sure nobody's going to use your printer without you knowing. It is, after all, a heat machine that can cause fires or be dangerous if it's misused. So a password is great. I'm just going to leave this one off because I'm just doing it as an example. Now, I'll go next. So you always have to pick your option and then go next. I don't like anonymous tracking, but if you do, you can turn it on. But I don't think we need to send information, so I'm just going to click next. The connectivity check, make sure you leave it at Google. If you use Cloudflare or 1111 instead of 8888 here, you can actually get yourself blacklisted. It happened to me a couple times. So 8.8.8.8 is okay. The default time is 15 minutes. And all this does is a way of Octoprint to tell you, hey, yeah, I'm still here. I'm alive. So enable and next. The blacklist plugins is essential. You don't want to put things on Octoprint that haven't been tested before, and Octoprint is full of plugins. Enable the blacklist, keeps it safe. Click next. Now the printer. So you have to know what kind of printer you're setting up. So let's use Ender 3 as an example. So I'm going to give it a name, and the model could be Ender 3. You can actually use the same name in both fields if you want, or use the manufacturer. It doesn't matter. Click on the build volume. It's rectangular, it's lower left, it has a heated bed. There's obviously no heated chamber on it, doesn't have an oven. Width 235, depth 235, so that's our square bed. And then we have 250 here for the Z gantry. And then we don't need to worry about the custom bounding, so I'm just going to click next. So basically you need basic knowledge of your printer and a few common sense questions in the setup. You hit finish and it's ready to go. So there's a new version, reload. That's just because we finished the setup wizard. And once it loads, we're into Octoprint. So you can see you have the basic terminal. If you leave these at auto for now on the side here and hit connect, it'll discover the ports for you that you're using on your Raspberry Pi and the baud rate of the printer. Now I'm going to hit disconnect, and I'm going to hit auto connect, and I'm going to save that connection. So now it'll remember all this information, and next time I load, I don't have to worry. It's just going to connect. So there's a few things you can see right off the start. You have your temperature graph, which is basic and normal, what your temperature of your printer is right now, and also these files on the side. Now these are on the SD card in the printer. You can also load copies of your STLs and your G-code up to Octoprint. If you set up the slicer, you can use STLs. If you don't, you just have to use the G-code files. So you would use Kira and then slice your file and then upload it. So I will give you an example here really quick. So if I grab my G-code file, and then I'm going to grab an Ender 3 because that's what we're using, and I'm just going to drop it in, so drag and drop. It'll actually grab that file. I hit print, and the printer will start. So it's fairly easy to start those jobs remotely when you're not in the same room as your printer. The other thing that I'm going to run through really quickly is a few plugins I like for Octoprint. So we have the basic print, pause, start, and we also have the basic temperature on, off, cancel right up here, but it can do so much more. Now I talked about some of it in the last video. The terminal is a powerful tool. You can put a webcam, and you can see my webcams here, but it looks like it's upside down. So if I hit the settings gear, I can go into the web camera and I can actually flip it, and I know I have to flip it both ways on mine. So that's the settings wrench, and then down to webcam, flip, flip, save. And then if I look at it now, the world's better. It's right side up. So I'm going to hit the same settings gear that we just did to grab the camera. And then from here, if we scroll down a bit, we already talked about installing Octoprint as a plugin, but there's some other plugins that are worthwhile to note. And some of my favorite ones I'll show, and I'll give a link down in the description as well. So Plugin Manager. And then in Plugin Manager, I'm just going to scroll down. I'm going to click Get More. So everything listed in this list is what I have right now. Get More brings me up the search window. And from here, I can add a few plugins. So it's important to note that after you install a plugin, you have to restart Octoprint. If you're going to do a few in a row, it's okay to install them all together and then do one final restart. But I wouldn't go crazy. I wouldn't do 10 in a row. I might do 5 or 6 and then restart. So some of my favorite add-ins are full screen webcam. So that lets you double click the webcam and then view it full screen and have some control. So again, I just click it and I click install, and you can see now it's gone from the list because we installed it. The next one that I'm going to install is Firmware Updater. So you can actually update your firmware through the Octoprint instance. So here's Firmware Updater. I want it, so I'm going to go ahead and click install. The window pops up, I wait a few seconds, it finishes the install, and I can hit close. Now this is a Raspberry Pi 4. That's why it's running so quickly right now. On a Raspberry Pi 3 or a 2 even, it might run a little slower and take a few seconds to install. But we can see up here in this corner now that I have installed 2 plugins and it's prompting for a restart, but I'm not done yet. So I have Firmware Updater, I have Full Screen plugin. The next one I like is Navbar Temp. So I'm just going to type in Navbar, and there's my Navbar Temp. And I'm just going to go install, and then again it'll flash install some things, and I can click close. The last one I'm going to show you here is the Tempsgraph plugin. So I'm going to go Tempsgraph, there it is, Tempsgraph, install. Now there are some other cool ones like Print Time Genius, and I'll leave a link to them. There's 2 more that I will install on a normal instance for myself, but I'll restart now, and then we'll get these add-ons running. So it'll warn you, do you want to proceed? Yes, yes I do. The most important thing is that restart. It will make all the add-ons active. It may take a few seconds because it has to actually restart the server, not just Octoprint itself. Print Time Genius, though, as I was mentioning a few seconds ago, it's a great add-on that parses G-code to give you a better, more accurate estimate of time of print jobs. So I'm just going to grab the reload now because we're done. And a few things should have changed as it loads. So once we get loaded, you can see here's my Navbar temperature now. It did load to the webcam window, so if I double click here, now I can get full screen webcam, and then you can see by hovering over it gives me keyboard controls. So if my mouse is inside the webcam window, I can now move the bed forward and backwards, up and down, home it, just by using the keyboard shortcuts listed underneath here. So these plugins will save you time. They help you analyze what your printer is doing a little bit better. As you can see here, I've changed the temperature graph now, so instead of just a boring flat line, it gives me more information about what's happening. And the last thing to note before we finish the video for today is that when it restarted, it saved all of our connection information and it did auto reconnect, so we saved ourselves that time. So there you have it, Octoprint. Half hour of time, 4 programs, $50 microcomputer, and away you go. You're remote controlling your printer, you're canceling those jobs and making sure things are running safely. It's an amazing thing, and I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you found it helpful, hit that like button. If you have some comments or questions, leave them down below. Hey, and you guys are awesome. 300 subscribers, we couldn't have asked for more. Like, share, subscribe. Let's get this community building. You guys are great. Have a good one.